there's a failure epidemic, and then there's a mental health crisis amongst founders, up to 5 times more prevalent than in the general population.
Phil Neal is a serial entrepreneur, high-stakes strategic growth advisor, an investor with a track record of scaling businesses to 8 figures exit.
We have to stop, let the world burn for a while. We have to listen to the whispers of transformation, which requires aimlessness. And we explore these pathways until we see the path to transformation.
Phil Neal is not just another business advisor. He's a strategic clarity partner who operates at the intersection of psychology, high-stakes decision-making, and exponential growth.
Failure is not bad. It's a gateway to transformation, but there's failure that transforms and there's failure that destroys.
His approach combines deep pattern recognition with battle-tested frameworks that unlock decision action and moments of uncertainty.
And I think right now people are more in the destructive failure zone because they don't know how to transform with failure. First thing is we have to have...
Phil, I just met you on the street and I have no idea who you are. What will keep me talking to you for 1 hour?
The thing I would say is I have a mission right now, trying to change the culture of entrepreneurship. And I think right now it's broken. There's a failure epidemic, and then there's a mental health crisis amongst founders, up to 5 times more prevalent than in the general population. And looking back at my journey from scaling a company to $70 million in revenue in 8 months, and then jumping into a loop of failures, finally understood that the root cause is less obvious than what we can read or learn through an MBA. It has to do way more with the internal journey that happens at the same time as we navigate the external journey of entrepreneurship. So that's a pretty large subject that is very important to me and that we can dive deeper into if you feel like it.
Would love to. And what a coincidence. I'm an entrepreneur as well, so cannot wait to dive into this because it sounds familiar. But for those listening, why this happens in the first place? What we are going through these times right now?
So my diagnostic is that we approach business in reverse and we have a blind spot. So if you look at every YouTube channel, classes, MBA, you're going to learn how to operate a business. There's a distinction between being a business person and an entrepreneur. They step into the unknown. They can become a founder, but they live on the lining of a coin, always outside their comfort zone, never knowing when the world's going to flip away their dream. There's a lot of elements that are not operationalizable. And so the first step that we take is we try to use a system and we try to fix a problem by building a system like a business person, but we're trying something new. So often what's going to happen is it's going to shake our strategy, which is the second place we go. Okay, well, maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe there's a better strategy, other tactics I can use. And ultimately where we end up failing is when all of that pressure crumbles internal journey that we should have begun with from the start, navigating that internal journey, which informs better decision, which translates to better strategy that we can then operationalize. But by doing it in reverse, we listen to the wrong signals, we make bad decision, and ultimately we lose the capacity to make good decision, which leads to failure, relinquishing the ownership that we need to have as entrepreneur in regards to our own journey, success, and failure by just being the puppet of other people's framework.
Yeah, indeed. And it's so often the case to follow the good practices instead of taking care of yourself first and see what exactly drives you. But I love your perspective on this. Like, what did you notice in working with people? Like, what inside them stopped them from going on the right path and actually failing when it's kind of a bit too late? They're already like middle of the journey and so on.
Yeah. So I can tell a bit more about my own story. And so this insight were hard-earned through a lot of destructive failures in the last few years. So I told you about my meteoric rise, right? 70 million in 8 months. And then I went into international business development. That happened in 2020. But as soon as this happened, we had a founder conflict. And that founder conflict disrupted our capacity to make decisions. And it led to a $5 million scam. Eventually, we thought we were back on. We signed a big $300 million contract. When the market shifted, we lost the contract. We were in deep financial pressure. We survived. In the midst of that, I sold partially before these unfortunate events, my shares. And then I had made a final exit a couple of years ago because we still had an inventory tied to the sale. And then I left my business partners at the time to join a new partner and spread myself super thin that to other failures. And so when I look back at my own story and the reason behind all of these failures, I codify it through a system that I call the Shadow of Entrepreneurship. And it starts with uncertainty, then it moves into fear and unworthiness. And when you're in the fear or unworthiness stage, you approach what I call the failure zone, which has a crossroad that you can either use to transform yourself or your business, or you miss that crossroad and you fall into a fallen hero, I would say, the kind of people that are angry at reality, spiteful, vengeful, a failed business. This is the result of that. So if I give you a clear example from my journey, when I did the huge scale up, it took a lot of energy. I was stressed, I was overworked, I was working in 2 different time zones. So I was already kind of in the shadow. My energy levels were low, so I was vulnerable to the shadows. And then once we made pivot, our business model was still kind of uncertain. So that uncertainty brought a level of fear that every shareholder felt. And that made the conflict more disruptive and intense. So if I were just to look at a white paper, I would read that one of the top 3 reasons, or the number one, depending on which one you read. The latest Harvard Business Review said 65% of startup failed because of founder conflict. Well, the root cause of that is the shadow that was not mastered by the different shareholder, and that incapacity to verbalize that state that they are in results to a conflict that escalates and destroys the business, because you don't argue over the right things. You argue about symptoms, not the deep root cause. So that was also the case afterwards. The founder conflict really made an unworthiness wound within me that I was aiming to fix by serial entrepreneurship and proving myself again and again. And that led me way too much outside my comfort zone, spread too thin. And when the universe flipped away on me and created a burnout in my technical founders in my nanotechnology company that I invested money and time in, you're not as strong and able to make the right decision again. And eventually, not breaking out of that loop brought me to a rock bottom moment where I was able to find intuitively the solution, and then went on a year-long exploration that led me to realize the framework and system that I now aim to make more people aware of, so that there's less failure, and entrepreneurship really serves the purpose it can serve, which is to be a force for good by being a force of transformation in society.
And can you dive into that framework? Because indeed, like saving at least 1 year, if not more, for some in failures, it is much easier to learn from others that went through that experience. And we'd love to hear what you came up with after 1 year of self-reflection and all the failures that you went through.
Yeah. So there's many things. I'm going to try to be structured. Of course, we're working on codifying it and making it helpful. I just founded the Courage Compass company, which has that mission. There's 3 levels to what I think makes an entrepreneur ready to embark on the journey and be less likely to fail. But even if they fail, because there's value in failure, there's wisdom and transformation through failure, as I pointed out. Well, there's a way to fail correctly and a way that it becomes destructive, right? So there's a nuance there. I don't want to frame failure as negative, because it's part of the norm right now. What I would say is emotional mastery, decision mastery, and intuition mastery are 3 layers that entrepreneurs need to learn how to monitor, to see the different components that makes mastery of these 3 levels, learn how to navigate it, and ultimately learn from them, because there's data in uncertainty, fear, and unworthiness, just as much as there's data in failure, pivoting, and all of that. And it becomes a superpower once you are able to see that navigate that, and then have the presence of mind to use it as an edge in business. I'm not sure I answered your
Yeah,
question though.
I think the last one, like the intuition, it's one of the hardest to master. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
Oh, it is.
Because
It took me a while. I recently understood it, I would say, even because what I learned during my 1 year is that I was very hope driven. I was a poor kid. I was parentified. I had to support my parents from the age of 14. That gave me a lot of hunger. And I always had this protector ethos. I always wanted to protect the people close to me. And so that made me be very comfortable being outside my comfort because I had a huge mission that I had to carry and be stronger for. But that was also something that caged me in my head. And I think in the modern times, we are disconnected with our body. We think, but we don't understand what we feel. And intuition is more of a whisper. It's a feeling that comes from within ourselves in a place that is, without being esoteric, it's kind of a weird wisdom place that don't have words, right? But if we, as founder, are in the shadows, then our head takes over. We want to chase growth. When I was losing money, the only thing I was thinking about is how do I not only regain the money, but more even, or more success and more validation. And this is what I call growth shouting, burying the whispers of transformation. And at some point, especially in the failure zone, we have to forget about all the metrics, all the goals. We have to stop, let the world burn for a while. We have to listen to the whispers of transformation, which requires aimlessness. And we explore these pathways until we see the path to transformation. It is very conceptual, but it has very real application. The two pivots I've done successfully in my business, the one that led to the scale up, and then the one that led to product market fit for my technology company afterwards, with letter of intents from hundreds of millions of dollars from micro niche companies like Lados and big names. They all came from, well, it's a pivot. And the secret of a pivot is to let go of growth and be receptive to something else that can emerge. And what emerged from me in the first time was a feeling that I should move my model from a purchasing department to focusing on nitrile glove. I didn't really know why and what. And then by exploring that, I eventually saw the model, and that led to the scale up. For Prometheum, thought we would be able to sell hair purifiers after COVID, but the market wasn't ready. And so I had to narrow down to our unique value prop, do a lot of research, kind of follow my curiosity. And eventually we pivoted the model for a component and found a product market fit through our value prop of eliminating gaseous pollutant. So this is not something you necessarily think your way through. You start by being curious in certain areas, and then eventually you can think your way through it. It's a shift from hope to courage. And it happens on the business level. It also happens at the leadership level. So,
and
so that's why I'm trying to help founders navigate.
yeah, indeed, and overlook this. A lot of businesses, and successful one, they didn't start as their main idea. Like they started probably, they didn't become successful with their main idea. They just start something to try, and almost all of them pivot at some point because they realize that market needs something else, or the problem they try to fix weren't able to validate it, and so on. And I have a friend that has both a newsletter and a podcast called Happy Accidents, and he researched all these businesses that are basically they become by accident. For example, I think the inventor of the super glue tried to do something totally different, and by mistake they mix these chemicals and they stick their finger together, and like, whoa, this is powerful. And it's so nice to and interesting to see this. And in the same time, a lot of people have no idea when to reinvent themselves or how to go from a state that where they feel trapped in their journey, and they're like, I kind of feel I have to make a pivot, but either the intuition is there, but the direction they have to go, they have no idea which is. And maybe it's more valid now than ever with AI. Like a lot of people like losing jobs and not being able to do what they did probably for for a decade, what would be your suggestion to them?
Yeah, it's a great point. And to your point, the first of the happy, these people would not have found that outcome if they were to attach to their core idea in the first place. So this is what I mean by transformation whispers and growth shouts. If you just hear your first plan shouted in your mind and you fear the failure, getting in the failure zone for that plan, then you're going to miss the real success. And as you mentioned, pivoting is the way to go. You rarely go into business and be lucky. I think it's 2% of first-time founder that make a sustainable businesses on their first try. 98% fail, depending on the source, 56 to 98. It's a majority. So going back now to your question about how to navigate AI and the uncertainty it brings, what I've done to heal from my own state of shadow and my uncertainty is I explored what I felt I needed to explore until I knew what I wanted to do. And so I started the year by exploring. I was still a bit in fear mode. So I decided I'm going to do some services. I'm very good at business growth. I went into advising go-to-market for an AI venture studio. We were launching 7 micro SaaS. I liked it. And then being a trainer in AI a little bit for real AI dynamics until I eventually got an offer to build a private equity fund in the defense space, which I felt was a path towards my next evolution as an entrepreneur. And that's when I decided to go all in. So it took me about 6 months until I found that level of clarity to embark on that new journey. So if I go to a more micro scale, if I'm someone working in a job right now, and I kind of feel that I need to do something, but I don't know why or what, I mean, it's okay. You can explore things that you feel without having the words to explain. And it's going to give you clarity through time. It doesn't come from thinking. It comes from trying things without goals. You can do it. And then the strategic layer that comes after that is your risk tolerance. You may not have the bandwidth to be a year without a job. I was lucky, but you can do it part-time. You can explore. You can use AI to brainstorm, but at some point also you have to kind of try things out. And maybe you feel like a YouTube channel is the way to go. Well, then go meet YouTubers. I try to support a YouTuber, gain some skill if you have a very low risk tolerance. If you have a big risk tolerance, just go out there and try it out. And, you have to gauge your risk tolerance, but you have to walk the path of the whisper before you can figure out what to do.
And how do you identify the risk tolerance that you have? Because most of us, for example, I'm thinking of myself. I was in a job. I had no idea that I have a high risk tolerance and I will be an entrepreneur. Literally, I never dream of being one. I imagine myself working in a cubicle all my life. I identified that after I start being an entrepreneur. Like you said, like I start doing, so I identify a lot of things about me. But someone is in a full-time job right now and they want to try it out and so on. And they are kind of on the fence in the sense that their side project, it's kind of picking up, but maybe it's not enough to quit the full-time job in order to pursue that full-time. How do you know, like, what's the moment? For me, I knew, like, I was lucky as well. My side project overpassed in revenue my full-time job, so I knew that it's safe to focus full-time on that. But not everyone is this lucky.
Well, I would say I have a similar story than you. I studied to be a high school teacher. I didn't feel even comfortable having a material goal when I was younger because I could see how money creates misery with my parents, and us being poor and always chasing money. And I didn't want that. But then I got into sales. I was really good. I got prizes. And then I bought real estate during my university. And I finally got to terms with it's okay to be ambitious. I set a social impact goal for myself first. I wanted to build a retreat, a karate camp. That was my first goal. And so because of that, I reversed engineering to what I knew, which was a rental property. And that made me want to be ambitious into attaining that goal. But I stumbled into business because of that. One of my colleagues said I would be a wasted potential if I don't go in business. And that became my call to adventure. So I have a high risk tolerance. Risk is a superpower of mine. Can navigate that very well. So I went into business, got into B2B sales, then pharmaceutical sales, medical device. And then I got a second call and I did the jump to entrepreneurship just because I felt I had potential over there to explore, because I could see the pattern of, hey, I'm motivated to become the best. And then once I'm there, I hate it. I don't like to farm. I like to do something else. And I thought, hey, that sounds like entrepreneurship, but it wasn't clear on actionable things. I would say to define our core motivation is very, very important, because I could see myself as discovering who I am through the path of entrepreneurship, which became a much different, compelling reason to get into that arena. If your only motivation is you want to work less and build passive income, then maybe entrepreneurship is not necessarily for you. Maybe you need a side gig, and then you may not have the risk tolerance to go all in, right? And that's okay too. It's not for everybody. But if you feel like it's something you have to do, I remember later in my career as an entrepreneur, when things were not going well, I started to doubt myself. I was thinking, should I go back to get a job then? But then when I projected myself in the future, I kept going back to the same conclusion. I would quit my job and I would go back to being an entrepreneur because that's who I am. And then the next layer of certainty is that is amor fati, like Nietzsche said, if I remember correctly. It's love your fate. Every fate has hardship. There's no one that's easy. So if entrepreneurship is your fate, then you have to live your fate. It is what it is. So I would start with reflecting on my core motivation, seeing if that builds the kind of person I want to be, seeing if my why is strong, seeing exactly the reason behind my business idea. And once I'm in the game, then you have to kind of deal with it from that standpoint. And then you go into strategy and operation, the reverse roadmap. So you start with that, the internal, the strategy is around your risk tolerance, and then you choose the operation that fits what you need to do.
And I love way much this approach than the old school one in which you build a perfect business plan. You have this brilliant idea that you think everyone will want to buy from your work with you and so on. And then you realize that you don't have what it takes to make it happen. And you say there's something interesting when it comes to chasing the work-less and passive income thing, which unfortunately in today's world, almost every guru is promoting become an entrepreneur because you can work less and earn while you sleep. When in reality, that's not the case. And most entrepreneurs I know, they work their ass off every single day. So when you see all this narrative online, it's so easy to fall into that trap. And sometimes you hit a wall, you go on that path, like, if that person can do it, I can do it as well. Until you realize that probably you don't have enough risk tolerance in order to be an entrepreneur. You probably didn't prepare enough internally before going into the nitty gritty of business. And going to that internal team, because I think it's one of those topics that is not discussed enough. And what else you discover that works well when it comes to building that resilience and arriving on the point that, especially when it comes to your energy level and so on, to be at balance with what you do rather than maybe sprinting, burning out after that. You grow for like 8 months, record revenue, and after that you weren't into position that you wanted to be.
Yes, that's a good question. There's many things there. Before I jump into it, I think also one thing that could be helpful for people that want to escape the rat race, that's a common narrative. There's an opportunity of joining a business and taking it over as an operator, the businessman path, not the entrepreneur path. It's more about, business is about system optimization. So you could, if you have a low risk tolerance, you could look at a business, and if through your self-awareness, you know what value you can bring to that business, then you can make your way to ownership. And that's going to get you into the entrepreneur arena, but in a much more minimally risky path, is how I would say it. Then to your question about the internal journey and what we can do to prepare ourselves. So defining the core motivation is one crucial step. And the way the internal journey plays out, and I think it might be useful to lay it out, is you start with your plan. So let's say you're an entrepreneur. You define your motivation, then you come up with a strategy and you operationalize it. The big gap is in the internal and the strategical decisions. How it plays out is typically you're going to get your plan in place, you're going to get into action, and hoops, reality is going to rub against it. And it's going to bring you in the uncertainty phase. Then if you miss navigating that, you're going to fall down the ladder. One thing I've built to help entrepreneurs make the right decision when they are in the uncertainty or fear phase is what I call the courage compass. And the courage compass is recognizing that we have decision making patterns that are destroying our capacity to make good decisions, and a way to navigate making better decision is by approaching it from different lenses. 4 quadrants: analytical, which is more data driven; structural, which is systems; relational, which is around people; and conceptual, which is around creativity. And so when we hit that roadblock, if we can detach ourselves from the decision, see that there's different answers that could be good for the same question you're asking, then you can let your intuition guide you towards the right quadrant versus being on autopilot.
What's interesting there is that you split it out in 4 very different quadrants, and especially the relationship part one. I would like to tackle a bit if you want to go into details, because it's often overlooked, and personally, I overlook it for so many years when it comes to, especially into the business itself. I just have now, quote unquote, co-founder is my wife that we work together, but before her, I was basically on lone wolf. I was a solopreneur. I was like, I work with some contractors and so on, but I still, at least in that part, I was good at building a relationship with my clients, but I was so bad at building a relationship inside my business.
It's the different lens than the relationship for decision making, but it's a very crucial lens. And so one thing that can improve internal relationship is understanding your cognitive style. There's a test out there called emergenetics that builds around the same 4 quadrants, and it gives you an idea about what's yours. So mine, I am a trimodal divergent brain. So I have a strength, 95th percentile conceptual, 93rd relational, and I have also a strength in analytical, but I'm very weak on structural. So if I have a wife that's structural, we're going to have an issue understanding ourselves, because I'm going to talk about ideas and she's going to say, okay, but what do you expect of me? Because she wants a structure. She wants to get things done. Well, I'm super happy thinking about a billion different pathways to this. And then the relational approach is more around, so there's a shadow in every quadrant, right? And the relational to the outside world, my strength can look very courageous. I don't care calling a CEO, trying to get something done. I'm very good at creating partnership. These are courageous acts, but they're within my comfort zone. The shadow of that is when I'm in the shadow, when I'm feeling pressured, I will have the same. I observe on myself a decision-making pattern that goes somewhat like that. Conceptually thinking about a million ways to do it, then going outside to get feedback and try to do it. At some point, reaching someone that gives me a contrarian feedback, panicking, going back to conceptual, and then at some point trying to cut it with logic. But if I'm too fear-based in my mindset, I can't. So that's why I think just writing the full quadrant and deciding where I want to go, where I feel I need to go, not where I think I have to go, makes decision quality way better. And if you also use that mindset for your internal relationship, like for my team covers the full spectrum. That's my diversity approach. I want to have all the cognitive style within me, especially the green one, because I need that. And then when I communicate, because I think about my decision from the 4 quadrant standpoint, I can explain it in a way that they would understand. I can say, hey, I thought about that, which is likely how they would decide. But then I decided to go there for that reason. I feel like we need to go there. So that creates a bridge of communication that will make your relationship with your business partner way better. So first of all, naming your shadow state is important. Then explaining through understanding both of your lenses is another one that is very important. And then the preparation work of defining everybody's core motivation is also very important, because that's ultimately what guides your instinct, and that's what should decide the right decision in that specific moment too, and that you can agree on, right? So
And when it comes to the team members or business partners, should we go as far as walking them through the test and identify exactly, so we know specifically who we are dealing with?
I do it. Yeah, everybody in my team has the test. Even my interns have the
Well,
test. It's really important, because once we have a project management phase, then we can put everybody on their natural strength. Because if you put me in a structural role, I can figure it out with my logic, but I will hate it, and then I would fight my way out of it and get into conceptual. Even as a sales rep, when I was beginning in sales, I was able to outcompete MBAs with my bachelor in education or scientists in pharmaceutical sales with my creative and relational strength, because I could figure out different ways. But at some points, I could have failed because of it too, because I don't like to just do the job. And when you're a sales guy, you have to get the volume in. And I was always kind of fighting against it. I knew I had to do it. I was measured on it. I had to do it. But I didn't like to do it. I didn't like to feel the CRM, all of these things, because they were not my natural cognitive style. So the more you remove these points of friction, and sometimes you just have to do it, but the more you can remove them, the better people are naturally productive.
indeed, and it really works. I did something similar. Was called something else. I don't remember exactly. It was called strength tests, and there were also like 4 quadrants, and they were like uh, I don't remember the specific name, but were the things that you were good at and also energize you, the things that you were good at but you didn't do them that often or something like that, the ones that are good at but drains you, which are basically learned strengths, and of course the weaknesses or something like that. And I didn't realize that I was spending a lot of time doing things that I was good at but drains me. And once I not entirely remove those, because some of them I still have to do it, but once I reduce the number of times I do them, my energy levels throughout the day increase quite a bit. And obviously removing the weaknesses, outsourcing that from my plate in order to be able to focus on the things that I'm good at. And often we hear this narrative that in order to grow, you need to learn new things and on. Of course, it's obvious that you need to learn new things, but if you don't double down on the things that you're good at or your strengths, basically, it's so hard to go the long haul, because at some point you'll hit a brick wall and you'll just burn out.
Exactly. And so it goes back to the courage compass. If you are in a pressure state, you're going to default to what you're naturally good at, and it's sometimes the business doesn't require that. But if you're under pressure, you're going to fight to stay there. And so this is a way to mitigate that, is to have a team that can step up with a different level of strength of you. And the other way is to acknowledge that you have this strength zone that you're naturally drawn to, but then you have to cut that pattern for a while. And the way you do it in a sprint. You don't do it as a marathon. One thing I've did wrong when I was starting my business, and I was always very good at protecting time I had with my kids, and being the father of the year was an identity that I was chasing for myself, and in a fun way to make it top of mind. And I turned down many promotion from the corporate world to have a good work-life balance. But when I stepped into the entrepreneur arena, I didn't factor in energy management as well as I thought I had. So yes, I was showing up, but I was showing up drained. And that was something I regret. It's a mistake of mine.
A lot of people are facing this challenge. They have young kids maybe, and they are entrepreneurs as well. And even if they spend time with them, it's not quality time, because, like you mentioned, they are probably drained and so on. How will you tackle this at this point with the experience that you went through?
Yeah. So I understand way more energy management is more important than time management. So we all know that we have buckets in our life. We have family, energy, business. There's a bunch of buckets. Being clear on those, again, the core motivation is very important. But once you acknowledge then that, you need to find a sense of harmony. Doesn't mean, and it doesn't happen with equal time allocation. It happens with energy balance. And so right now, first of all, I understand that even for business, sometimes it's okay to stop and let the world burn for a while. We think we have to fight every fire. Every fire sometimes just take care of shedding the whole skin and letting the new one rise, right? It doesn't, it isn't as dramatic as we think often. So that's a way I protect my energy, is I sometimes say, hey, this is not worth fighting. Let me just regain my balance, and then it's going to be way more efficient. The other way is when I know my business is going to a season that has to have a lot of my vitality, I put boundaries on it. So I call that sprinting. So I sprint for 30 days because I know after 40 days ish, I get burned out. I start not making good decision anymore. So I can go for a while without feeling the effect on my quality of decision in my personal life. But if I don't I'm not mindful of setting boundaries around that, then I'm just going to burn everything around me, right? Nobody wins. So that's another way I'm protecting myself. And then I have this Hoorah ring. I lost the charger. I just ordered a new one, but Apple Watch, whatever. You can monitor your sleep level. Sleep has been a revelation for me. I don't sleep enough. I need to sleep more. And so just being mindful of increasing and protecting your level of energy also extends your bandwidth. So that would be the three things I'm applying now.
Yeah, and for everyone listening right now or watching, it's something that we don't value enough, right? Like our own body, like from sleep to nutrition to like simply setting some boundaries, even with our loved ones. Like we need time for ourselves, we need time alone to recharge and so on. And it's a bit sad to see like a lot of people not having this, and me including. Most of the time, I struggle to find that energy balance. I kind of know where I'm more the energy is at my peak and so on, but sometimes it's hard to like follow my own advice and so on. And if someone that's watching right now or listening in that situation, they are like struggling with this, they know the theory, they know that they should set boundaries, they should sleep more, they should eat better and so on, but still facing this brick wall in which like I don't know what else to do. What would be some actionable tips you have for them?
First thing is we have to have self-compassion. We're doing something that's very hard. We're an entrepreneur, or we're striving to reach a goal that's outside our comfort zone. And I think we don't give ourselves enough leeway of failing and being in um trying hard and being hurting a little bit and not figuring everything out. First of all, I think we should have more self-compassion. We're doing something hard. We're going outside our comfort zone, and it involves failure. It involves not being on mark all the time. One thing I do with my Courage Compass company is what I call see it, navigate it, and learn from it. So I think the first step is the self-awareness. So being mindful of our current state and how long we can actually keep it. So for example, for me, I could feel at some point physically that okay, this is my limit, but I have to keep going. You can extend a bit past your limit, but you start seeing with time the negative effect it has on yourself, your capacity to be a leader. And so you take a note. All right, that was kind of my limit there. And eventually you fail again. You go past your limit again. So you take other notes. And eventually you are able to kind of see the limits of your energy. Um, and then you build tools to navigate that better. You put sprint on it, boundaries. And then eventually you learn from it and you optimize your energy, you have different habits, you navigate it better, and it becomes an indicator that, okay, maybe I need to rethink my strategy now, because if I don't change how I'm approaching this season, I'm going to hit a wall. So that's my approach to mastering the emotional mastery, the decision mastery, and the intuition mastery of the internal journey. And it's a very useful framework as well to learn to navigate your energy level.
Indeed, especially because there is that learning part. When someone goes through a framework like this, they'll have different feelings, different results, different point of view, and they need to like take what works for them, right? And that's what I love about frameworks, because they are so flexible. You can take it and apply it in your own world, into your own situation, and so on. And navigating, of course, is never easy to your compass approach, but in the same time, it's kind of the only way to learn what works for you and what doesn't. Of course, we that's the beauty of other people's journey, because we learn a lot from it as well. But we need to try. We need to like literally put in the try and do it ourselves. And for those watching or listening right now, and they resonate a lot with what you share, when they can reach out to you in order to get help.
I have a website, philneil.com, so PHILNEIL.com. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. I will expand on other social media as everything falls in place. But for now, that's really how people can reach out and work with me.
And those will be down below as well. And I'd like to conclude with a short challenge from you to those that watch or listen. What's one step they can do in less than 1 week in order to identify those energy drainers that are affecting the decision making and intuition and so on?
The energy drainers. Well, I think journaling is a very strong tool. I used it for clarity quite a bit. I don't journal about necessarily my feelings, but I journal about my vision, my habits, things like that. And as you build the habit of getting a self-awareness zone in your day, then you can actually quantify and see things that would not be as apparent if you didn't monitor them. Then it overlaps a little bit with the shadow. So the shadow is not just about energy. It's really about emotional state that there's no exoneration from them. I cannot fix the shadow of entrepreneurship. It and I should not fix the shadow of entrepreneurship because there's valuable insights from our own shadow. So the way to do it is to learn to recognize it and then get the tools to navigate it, which I'm building and which you can build for yourself. And then ultimately, it's to learn from it. And end goal of transformation as a leader is to eventually find the wisdom within, not outside. And that was a big shift for me, is acknowledging that I could make my own wisdom. But that requires a lot of self-awareness. Self-awareness requires outside perspective and action, right? Reflection, I would say.
And that reflection part, it's so powerful, especially when you do it without distractions around you. I remember my wife keep on telling me like, you should do that activity without your phone nearby, or you're watching something or learning something, either a podcast or whatever. Like, for example, if you're listening to this conversation, just do this activity. Don't try to do it. I know it's hard because you often probably listen to podcasts while going to the gym or walking and so on. But taking that time to self-reflect by just walking without doing anything else, or any sort of activity, hiking or something that involves movement as well, it's so freaking powerful, because ideas come from there, like breakthroughs and so on. And like you said, like that awareness that comes with it, it's so powerful, because without awareness, it's so hard to see exactly where we stand.
Yes, and at the end of the day, when you go to the point where you create your own wisdom, well, it might be that for you, movement is what sparks that self-awareness and reflection, like taking a walk. It might be for me, I discovered that expansiveness is very important for my sense of bliss and my well-being. So when I go to a mountain and I see an expansive view, it really helped. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with nature. It has to do with the feeling of its expansiveness. But weather is a good, nature is a good gateway to that. That's the reward of stepping outside your comfort zone, is you eventually gather the broken icons of the recipes of other around you that were driving your life, and you make them into your own internal path to your wisdom within. And one thing I would add to that is if you are an entrepreneur and you want a system that unlocks it for you, I'm working on what I call the shadow check ritual, which operationalize monitoring these trigger and emotional state, leading towards the better decision in business. So it's really applied for entrepreneurship.
Awesome. And when it will be available?
By the end of the year. So the next step for us is we're building an entrepreneur readiness score that we're going to give away. We're launching a pilot in 2 weeks, and then we're going to release it for the early. Well, if you go to my website, you can sign up and you're going to be given a free test. That's the first step on our how to deliver the what that we're building for the why that I mentioned to cure the entrepreneurial culture. And the rest we're going to discover as the years go.
Yeah, I think that will be powerful because indeed, often if you remove that friction, like, are you actually ready? Then it's much more easier to, oh, peace of mind. I'm actually ready to step into this and so on. And after that, identifying the internal things is so powerful.
Yeah, I think it's going to make a huge difference. We have to stop the unnecessary suffering because we don't know how to name the internal journey. That we need to fix it. We need to understand the impact it has on the failure rate. It's not normal to have such a high failure rate, especially with AI. AI is now making human creativity rise in value a lot, and entrepreneurship is moving from a trend to a potential way of being productive as a standard in the coming years. And if so, we cannot have it with a 98% failure. We have to make sure that we know how to navigate that internal journey and have a rapid iteration process, not just for our products, but for also ourselves as entrepreneur, where we have feedback, integrate it, and then transform faster and more efficient to reach the point where we go through the whole hero journey loop and collect the real treasures, which is the growth, the personal growth that comes with the adventure.
Exactly. And it taps into everything, right? Like, if you don't fail as an entrepreneur, you'll live a much more fulfilling life, and you'll tap into your personal life and so on. Because when you know yourself, it's much more easier to make decision in any parts of your life.
Just a quick nuances. Failure is not bad. It's a gateway to transformation, but there's failure that transforms and there's failure that destroys. And I think right now people are more in the destructive failure zone, and because they don't know how to transform with failure. So that's a crucial knowledge gap.
Failure is feedback, right? And the reality is that the most we fail and you learn from it, the better. But in the same time, to not destroy ourselves and to be self-compassionate, as you mentioned. Because it's much more important than, uh, oh my God, like every single time when we go through a difficult part, we just punish ourselves because we fail and so on, rather than seeing that as feedback and learning from it. Phil, the work that you do, it's absolutely amazing and so helpful for the world that we're living in. And thank you so much for doing that work and for joining me today.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and to get my message known. And I really had a good time.